Hello Midnights. Thank you for tuning in. Up next, The Chilling Smile, Deconstructing the Urban Myth of the Smiling Man. Let us know where you are listening from and don't forget to subscribe. Urban myths don't just exist, they fester in the internet's darkest corners, born from whispers in late-night forums and propagated through chilling chain emails that snag on our deepest fears. Among these digital campfire stories, none quite unnerves like the tale of the smiling man. This isn't just a story, it's a meticulously crafted dread, preying on the primal human anxieties of the uncanny, the utterly unexplained, and that gut-wrenching terror of something profoundly, irrevocably wrong hiding just beneath the thin veneer of ordinary life. While the smiling man is purely fictional, its enduring grip lies in its potent cocktail of psychological horror, a disturbingly plausible setting, and a single, simple image that's etched into your mind long after you've read it: that smile. The myth of the smiling man gained significant traction in the early 2010s, primarily through internet forums and creepypasta sites. While no single first sighting can be definitively pinpointed, the story often traces its roots to anonymous online accounts claiming real-life encounters in seemingly ordinary American cities, particularly those with a reputation for quiet, suburban nights. It is plausible that early versions circulated on anonymous image boards like 4chan or the more narrative-focused Something Awful forums before finding a dedicated home and wider audience on platforms like Reddit/NoSleep. The very anonymity of these accounts is crucial to the myth's power, adding a layer of unsettling authenticity. The accounts feel genuine precisely because the witnesses remain unnamed, suggesting they are either too traumatized to come forward fully, or that their stories are simply too outlandish for conventional attribution. The vagueness of the location, a quiet street, a residential area, a seemingly deserted downtown street after midnight, or even a dimly lit park, only serves to make the threat feel more universal and immediate, allowing any reader to imagine their own neighborhood as the setting for such a chilling event. The why of his appearance is almost always left unanswered, contributing to the myth's arbitrary and thus more terrifying nature, suggesting an entity without discernible motive, existing solely to instill dread. There's no specific ritual or reason for his manifestation, he simply is, and he appears, a silent, grinning harbinger of inexplicable terror. The core of the smiling man myth centers on a chilling encounter, usually from the perspective of an ordinary person walking alone late at night in a seemingly normal urban area. Our protagonist, perhaps returning from work, a study session, or a social gathering, first notices a lone figure in the distance. This figure is often isolated on a deserted street, moving strangely, sometimes described as dancing erratically, almost like a street performer gone horribly wrong. As the protagonist draws closer, or as the figure begins to approach with an unnerving, deliberate, and often silent pace, the horrifying details come into focus. The man himself is typically tall and gaunt, his thin frame obscured by nondescript, somewhat old-fashioned clothing, perhaps a dark, worn suit, a billowy trench coat, or faded generic attire that offers no clues to his identity. But it's his face that truly freezes the blood, an unsettling, exaggerated smile. This grin is described as unnaturally wide, stretching beyond the normal bounds of a human mouth, revealing too many unnaturally white or yellow teeth. It's utterly devoid of warmth, genuine mirth, or any recognizable human emotion, a rictus of pure, unadulterated wrongness, fixed in place like a permanent, macabre mask. His movements are equally disturbing, often described as disjointed, jerky, and almost marionette-like, as if his joints are hinged incorrectly. Yet, these movements can also be unnaturally fluid and graceful, adding to the profound sense of something being terribly wrong. Sometimes, he's said to glide rather than walk, his feet seemingly not touching the ground, or to move with an impossible elasticity. The atmosphere around him often feels palpably colder, heavier, or utterly silent, a vacuum of sound that heightens the observer's isolation and vulnerability. The encounter usually escalates with the smiling man slowly, deliberately closing the distance. His silent approach is as terrifying as his appearance. He might maintain unwavering, unblinking eye contact, his eyes, if described, being unsettlingly dark, vacant, or perhaps too bright and feverish, reflecting no human empathy. The climax often sees the smiling man fixing his gaze on the protagonist, perhaps tilting his head at an impossible angle, or making a sudden, aggressive lunge with a quick, impossible burst of speed that defies normal locomotion. Sometimes, he speaks in a chilling, nonsensical manner, a guttural, wet laugh too loud for the quiet night, or whispered words that make no logical sense but resonate with undeniable malevolence, such as a repetitive, sing-song "Are you happy now?" or a guttural "Join us." Then, he simply vanishes into thin air, leaving no trace but the victim's sheer terror. The survivor is left with an indelible sense of dread, a lingering chill that permeates their bones and psyche. The haunting image of that perpetual, horrifying grin is burned into their mind, often accompanied by a profound sense of isolation and vulnerability, knowing that something truly anomalous exists just beyond their comprehension, capable of breaching their reality at will. The variations of the myth further amplify its reach and terror. Some accounts describe the smiling man mirroring the victim's movements with disturbing precision, mimicking their attempts to walk faster or change direction, or appearing in completely unexpected places, suddenly behind them, or standing in their path again after they thought they had escaped, heightening the sense of being relentlessly stalked and the chilling futility of escape. Others detail the witness trying desperately to escape, running as fast as they can, only to find the smiling man suddenly closer than before, defying physics and spatial logic, as if distance itself warps around him, making every step an exercise in despair. A particularly disturbing variant suggests that the smile itself is contagious, not physically, but psychologically, leaving those who witness it with an involuntary, horrifying grin of their own that they cannot control, a rictus of terror or madness, hinting at a subtle, insidious corruption of the mind and spirit that lingers long after the encounter. These additions don't just expand the story, they deepen the psychological impact, transforming a simple encounter into a persistent, existential threat that questions the very fabric of reality, sanity, and personal safety. The power of the smiling man stems from several key elements of its construction. Firstly, its setting is universally relatable: a quiet street, a late hour, the inherent vulnerability of being alone in the dark. This mundane backdrop makes the supernatural intrusion all the more jarring and horrifying. It suggests that horror isn't confined to dilapidated haunted houses, isolated cabins, or ancient burial grounds, but can breach the safety of our everyday urban landscapes, turning the familiar into a potential hunting ground for the inexplicable. This domestication of dread allows the reader to easily project themselves into the scenario, enhancing the fear and making the unseen threat feel far more immediate and personal. The complete lack of explanation for his presence or purpose amplifies the terror, as there are no rules to understand him by, no known weaknesses, and no logical defense. As folklorist and cultural critic Dr. Jan Harold Brunvand noted in his work on urban legends, the effectiveness of such tales often lies in their ability to present a warning or comment on modern life, often with a moral message or a dose of contemporary anxiety. The smiling man perfectly encapsulates the anxiety of safety being illusory even in familiar spaces. Secondly, the smile itself is a masterstroke of psychological horror. A smile is typically a universal symbol of friendliness, happiness, and reassurance, a fundamental expression of human connection. When it is twisted into something grotesque, unnerving, and malevolent, it creates a powerful sense of cognitive dissonance and primal revulsion. The familiar becomes alien, and the comforting becomes profoundly threatening. This uncanny valley effect, a term coined by roboticist Masahiro Mori to describe the unsettling feeling aroused by objects that appear nearly human but are not quite, is exploited to full effect. The smiling man exists squarely in this disturbing territory, close enough to human to register as a person, but profoundly off enough to trigger deep-seated unease. The smile isn't just an expression, it's a mask, a perversion, a sign that the entity behind it operates entirely outside the bounds of normal human emotion or intention. It represents a joyous malevolence, a creature reveling in the fear it instills, which is far more terrifying than a monster driven by simple anger, hunger, or a desire for revenge. The sheer wrongness of the smile suggests a profound, alien disconnect from humanity, an entity that understands human expressions only well enough to mock and distort them for its own inscrutable, terrifying amusement. Beyond the smile, the lack of sound from the smiling man's movements, combined with his unnatural gait, taps into a primal human fear of predators who move silently and with unnatural grace, signifying a being outside the normal food chain, utterly alien and dangerous. This oral vacuum only amplifies the victim's internal panic, leaving them with nothing but their own racing heartbeat for company. Furthermore, the ambiguity surrounding the smiling man's true nature contributes significantly to its terror. Is he a ghost haunting lonely streets? A demon summoned from another realm? A serial killer with a bizarre and ritualistic modus operandi? A creature from another dimension that merely phases in and out of our reality? Or is he, perhaps, a pure manifestation of urban paranoia and collective fear, a psychological entity given form by the shared anxieties of a population, a dark tulpamency brought forth by the very act of believing in such horrors? The myth deliberately leaves these questions unanswered, allowing the reader's imagination to fill in the blanks with their deepest, most personalized fears. What we don't know, what remains unexplained, is often far more terrifying than what we do know, and the smiling man capitalizes on this inherent human tendency to fear the unknown and the unknowable. As horror author H.P. Lovecraft famously wrote, "The oldest and strongest emotion of mankind is fear, and the oldest and strongest kind of fear is fear of the unknown." The smiling man embodies this principle perfectly. The lack of clear motive or origin makes him an arbitrary force of malevolence, an embodiment of senseless dread that can appear to anyone, anywhere, at any time, without warning or provocation. This unpredictability and lack of a discernible pattern add another layer of pervasive anxiety to daily life. The horror is not just in the encounter itself, but in the lingering, chilling question that haunts the survivor: why me? And could it happen again? Is this an isolated incident, or has something fundamentally shifted in the world, making it a little less safe, a little more bizarre? The proliferation of the smiling man, much like the vast majority of contemporary urban myths, is inextricably linked to the internet. Digital platforms haven't just provided a stage for these tales, they've become the very soil in which they germinate and flourish. Forums such as Reddit's r/NoSleep, a dedicated hub for creepypasta short horror stories meticulously crafted to be shared online, often masquerading as genuine first-hand accounts, were instrumental in the myth's initial dissemination and continuous evolution. The interactive and anonymous nature of these online communities creates a uniquely fertile ground for fear. Here, users aren't just passive consumers, they're active participants. They don't simply read the core narrative, they add their own subtle variations and elaborations, often framing them as personal experiences. This collaborative storytelling blurs the critical line between fiction and unsettling potential reality. Each retelling, while preserving the central, terrifying image of the grin, injects fresh details or introduces new perspectives, ensuring the myth remains perpetually fresh, unsettling, and remarkably adaptable to changing anxieties. This anonymity of online sharing fosters a chilling sense of collective vulnerability. When countless unnamed witnesses recount their seemingly authentic encounters with the smiling man, it creates an unsettling echo chamber that reinforces the myth's eerie plausibility in the audience's mind. The very act of reading these accounts contributes to the myth's power, lending a pseudo-documentary feel to pure fiction. This participatory element, where readers become contributors to the myth's organic growth, transforms it into a potent cultural phenomenon. It has not only influenced other forms of online horror but has also inspired derivative works like fan art and short films, further cementing its place in modern folklore. Scholars of digital folklore continue to analyze these unique dynamics, studying how such narratives take root, spread, and evolve within the vast, interconnected web, demonstrating the internet's profound role as a modern-day campfire for our deepest fears. In conclusion, the smiling man transcends a mere internet spook story. It stands as a potent testament to the enduring, almost alchemical power of urban myths in our hyper-connected digital age. Its genius lies in its deceptively simple premise, which expertly taps into humanity's deepest, most primal fears, the unknown that gnaws at the edges of our perception, the unsettling dread of the uncanny, and the profound vulnerability of individual isolation. This narrative doesn't rely on elaborate special effects or complex, convoluted lore. Instead, its chilling effectiveness springs from a single, unnaturally twisted smile, a visage forever etched into the minds of those who encounter its tale. It's a reminder that true horror doesn't always roar from the shadows, sometimes, it simply grins. As long as we, as humans, remain predisposed to fear what lurks in the unseen, what defies rational explanation, and what subtly twists the familiar into something monstrous, the smiling man will continue his unsettling, silent dance. He endures in the annals of modern folklore, a silent, grinning specter of urban dread, a perpetual reminder that the greatest terror often resides not in what we can dissect and understand, but in that which simply is, choosing to exist solely to unsettle and haunt our collective psyche.